the sacred space of our Sunday morning service. It's just a joy and a pleasure and an honor to be here to have this type of conversation every week with you, and a conversation, as we've said many times over, it's designed to open us up to something that is beyond thought, beyond words, something that is intimately and intrinsically a part of our own deepest nature, but because of thoughts and because of words, we tend to ignore it. And the ignorance or the ignoring of our deepest nature has us in all of the turmoil, anxiety, and searching, but never finding that we are habitually addicted to. And so this is a conversation to end all addiction. The addiction to illusion, the addiction to seeking but never finding, and to actually get to a place where we're using thoughts and using words to go beyond into the silence of our own heart, where the hidden mystery is, the mystery that we are love itself, that we are life itself, and that we've been kissed by the infinite, all-powerful, all-knowing source or God. That's how we've come to be. That's really something that, again, we tend to ignore a lot. That we are, that you're conscious, that you're awake. You're not the chair, you're not the rug, you're not the book. Even though everything's permeated by consciousness, there's something unique and divine about being self-aware, knowing that you exist. That is something that is the most priceless treasure in all of creation. And again, we are constantly, habitually thrown outside with our attention and our focus and our addictions and our appetites and our searching, so that we actually are ignoring the pearl of great price, which is that you are. And again, these are words and these are thoughts. So when we are still in a state of ignorance, these words and these thoughts will kind of ding and bounce off of our forehead, and we don't really know what they're leading us towards because we're busy using our own dictionary of terms to suss out what's being said with these thoughts and these words. So one of the things that we like to do here is sort of blow apart our preconditioned concepts and meanings, so that we can actually come to this moment with a beginner's mind, a sense of not knowing who we are, but not in the state of despair that it's unknowable, but the fact that we don't know, we are then right to discover it. Like Jesus said, you have to enter the kingdom like a little child. You can't enter it otherwise. If you think you already know and you're certain about who you are and what everything means, and you can be the judge and determiner of the good and the bad of life, then you're locked out of your own deepest nature. And so in order to come home, in order to know the source of your existence, which is love, joy, peace, and true relationship, you have to come to this moment not knowing who you are. So this is a biggie, and we're going to be looking into it today. We're going to be being helped along in thoughts and words by Hafiz, by Alan Watts, and by A Course in Miracles. So again, hope you enjoy the ride. So we're going to start by simply getting quiet, finding the breath, relaxing into the space of the present moment. And just finding yourself in a place of giving up, seeking outside of yourself, and giving up the attachment to whatever's arising, bodily sensations, emotions, or thoughts. You're simply coming home to the witnessing state, the bright awareness of now. And as you soften into the moment by simply just abiding as the witness, make the intention to become pliable, teachable, open, calm. And as your mind and awareness settles into the calmness, the quietness of the present moment, what also begins to become more apparent is that you have a discerning faculty, again, innate or natural to the calm witnessing state. This discerning faculty is able to see truth from illusion, dream from reality, truth from falsehood. It is something that's been covered up by our good and bad thinking. So we want to let go of the attachment that we have of the good and the bad as we've determined it. Come to the moment as a little child, not knowing, and in that not knowing can dawn this higher discernment, this buddhi, as it says in Sanskrit, which is Buddha consciousness or Buddha nature. There's a little story coming out of Zen Buddhism that kind of gets to the heart of Buddha nature, and maybe you've heard this one before. A student comes to the master and says, "Master, you've told us that all things have Buddha nature. The wind, the trees, the animals, the stars, all living things are Buddha nature." And the master nods in agreement. So then the student says, "Well, then do I have Buddha nature?" And the master says, "No." And he says, "Well, you just said everything, everyone has Buddha nature." And he says, "You don't." "What do you mean I don't?" He says, "You don't because you're the one asking the question." And we're going to explore what that means today. In A Course in Miracles, he actually calls the ego the questioning compartment of the mind. The ego asks myriads of questions, he says in the Course. The ego is loaded with questions. Who am I? What is life? Why can't I be happy? Why can't I get my way? Why does things have to be so difficult? All of these different questions that the ego will, ask without relenting. And what these questions are, he says in the Course, are simply propaganda for the ego. Because remember, the ego is the questioning compartment of the mind. So it will ask infinite amounts of questions, but it will never give you the answer to what you're asking. So the ego is simply asking questions to reassert its reality in your mind, which is you don't know who you are. You are actually seeking for who you are. You lack intrinsically from your birth, the ego says, you lack what you need the most. And that's why it sends you outside of yourself on these endless quests and questionings of life, never having you arrive at the answer that would finally settle you and sedate the drive to get. And it'll never happen because the ego simply is the questioner. And that questioner is not the Buddha nature, as the master just told us in the story. The one who's asking the question doesn't have Buddha nature, doesn't have connection to divine self. And almost all of us entirely have identified completely with that questioning compartment, that part of the mind that has divided us, separated us from our own deepest nature. This is all a play of consciousness, And it's all being done by you to yourself. So this part of the mind that we call me could never find what you, the deeper you, wants. Have you noticed this? Who's found it? That's why, again, we keep coming back to this theme. The Sufis call it fana, or self-annihilation. The idea you see in Buddhism and Christianity, you have to die to this false ego in order to awaken as your true self. You cannot fix this part of yourself. You have to see it for what it is and know it ain't you. It's been a character that you've been hypnotically playing inside of a false fantasy or dream. That's why these teachings are designed to awaken you from the dream of being a self that you're not. So that's where we're going today, and we'll start with Hafiz. So this one is entitled The Vintage Man. The difference between a good artist and a great one is the novice will often lay down his tool or brush, then pick up an invisible club on the mind's table, and helplessly smash the easels and jade. Whereas the vintage man no longer hurts himself or anyone and keeps on sculpting light, capital L, light. So two different parts of your mind are being described here. The one part is trying to make life, it's making its creation, and it's doing its best. But when it's done with the agenda of trying to do its best, he says it puts down the tool or brush and then picks up the invisible club. And we've seen this image before in other teachings. And you start to hurt yourself and hurt others with this invisible club of the mind. That's because there's a part of the mind that is unaware that everything is itself. And in order to come to a place of inner peace, it has to recognize the value in everyone and everything and honor that. Give the honor and the value and the love to everyone and everything. Otherwise, it says that this mind will helplessly smash the easels and the jade. In other words, everything that it's trying to do with its agenda will get wrecked because it has this part of itself that is afraid, cut off from its deeper nature. And as a result of identifying with the self, it's actually designed to keep you from your deeper nature, so it actually is self-destructive even when you think you're trying to do the right thing. That's why he says it helplessly destroys what it's trying to make, what it's trying to bring about for its happiness and for others' happiness. That's the unaware mind that doesn't know itself. That's why he said no good deed goes unpunished. And then Jesus says in a workbook in A Course in Miracles, trust not your good intentions, because many who have had good intentions still find themselves in hell. The other part of the mind he calls the vintage man, the one that has self-awareness, no longer hurts himself or anyone and keeps sculpting the divine light, recognizes there is the light of the one in all beings, and has come to a place of inner knowing and inner surrendering to that light. Going on to this one, so many gifts. Hafiz tells us, there are so many gifts still unopened from your birthday. There are so many handcrafted presents that have been sent to you by God. The beloved does not mind repeating, everything I have is also yours. Please forgive Hafiz and the friend if we break into a sweet laughter when your heart complains of being thirsty. When ages ago, every cell in your soul capsized forever into this infinite golden sea. Indeed, a lover's pain is like holding one's breath too long in the middle of a vital performance, in the middle of one of creation's favorite songs. Indeed, a lover's pain is this sleeping. When God just rolled over and gave you such a big good morning kiss. There are so many gifts, my dear, still unopened from your birthday. So remember that story we heard just a few minutes ago where the student asked if he had Buddha nature when the teacher had said everyone, everything is Buddha nature eternally. And the master said, no, you don't have Buddha nature. Being the self that divides you from your true self or Buddha nature, you will not recognize all of the gifts that are constantly flowing into your life. They just won't show up on the radar. That's what's really wild about this, the power of belief. Once you get an idea in your mind and you believe that is real, then that idea will be all that you see showing up in your world. And the ego thought system is so tricky that that idea looks like it's also being done to you, so that it gives you a sense of confirmation that I was right. This is the way people are. This is the way the world works. And I'm not the one who's doing it. It really is clear that it's being done from out there to me. And he's saying, forgive the friend if we break into laughter, because that's just not the way it is. When you are complaining about being thirsty, being unfulfilled, being lonely, being angry, being upset, being anxious, fill in the blank with the lack state that you're experiencing. When you complain about that, whether to yourself or to others, the enlightened Hafiz and the Supreme Being laugh, not out of disdain and condescension to you, but because ages ago, every cell in your soul capsized, went down, sunk into this infinite golden sea. You've never left your source. You can't be separate. You're flooded with God. Your cells are dividing and metabolizing, and you're breathing, and your cognitive abilities and your nervous system firing. All of these multitudes of functionings and forces is the knowledge and name of God playing out in your being. And yet, because of your power of belief, and you're saying that you're a self, that you're not. You can't recognize so many gifts. You would be flooded with this infinite golden love. And then you would realize there's nothing to get. It would totally turn the tables on the paradigm of the belief system you've been operating in up until now. There's nothing to get. Everything I have, he says, is yours. And it's been like that for eternity. Another Zen poem, Haku and Zenji, says we're like a person crying out in thirst, so imploringly when we're in the midst of the sea. We're like the child of a rich person who's wandered away among the poor. It's just our wandering in our mind that has us feeling and thinking that the world is the way it is and that we are thirsty, that we lack. And then because we don't recognize the subtlety of the self-deception, and we're going to play on this a lot, it's a self-deception. Nobody's doing this to you. The subtlety of this self-deception will then give you these crazy ideas that you actually have to take what you're lacking from other people. By taking it from them, you'll have it. And all that really does, once the buzz of the intoxicant wears off, of whatever you're taking, once that buzz wears off, what you've done to yourself in perpetuating this self-deception has reinforced that you lack. Right? Doesn't that happen? You think you're getting what you finally wanted. The buzz wears off, and you're even further down than where you thought you would be if you got it. So again, a play of light, a trick of mind. That's why Hafiz says we have to medicate you. We have to medicate you. Resist your temptation to lie by speaking of separation from God. Otherwise, we might have to medicate you. In the ocean, a lot goes on beneath your eyes. Listen, they have clinics there too for the insane who persist in saying things like, I'm independent from the sea. God is not always around. God is always around, gently pressing against my body. So, resist the temptation to lie to yourself. You're not separate from the infinite love. All of these beliefs are telling you you are. And we have been habitually addicted to believing in this false script of me, mine, my life, what's been done to me, what I've done to others. All of that has become this cocoon of false beliefs that have perpetuated the thirst. Notice Hafiz is saying that God is actually not separate from you and pressing against your body. Jesus says it very much in the same way, where he says God's light and love are constantly being poured down around you. Like it's just constantly all of these birthday gifts are being transmitted, flooding into your channel of consciousness constantly. Jesus says we have to get you to open that inner door so that God's gifts can flow into you, not just around you. You're in an infinite sea of blessing, but you've hermetically sealed your heart. You know, one of the only good parts of Godfather Part 3 was when Michael goes to see the cardinal in Rome. Do you remember this? Has anybody seen Godfather Part 3? And the cardinal takes one of the stones out of the fountain, and he basically, because Michael is complaining about all of the problems in his life and his suffering. And the cardinal, in light of Michael's comments, you know, Michael is the Don, right? He's the boss. And he has, you know, done really crazy stuff in his life. And the cardinal breaks open the rock and he says, look, this rock has been in this fountain for decades and no water has gotten into it. He says, this is your heart. You've made your heart like a rock, like stone. And you could be flooded by God's blessing and love and never know it and continue to self-deceive and act insanely. And in your belief system, God is not there. And that's real. And it's only because you have aided and abetted the lie that you're separate from God. And the more you feed those beliefs that say you're separate, you're alone, God is not here, the harder your heart gets. Right? So this is where we have to start to open and loosen our grip so that we can feel and find that the blessings are now coming in. So on that note, this one is mine. Someone put you on a slave block, and the unreal bought you. Now I keep coming to your owner saying, this one is mine. You often overhear us talking, and this can make your heart leap with excitement. Don't worry, I will not let sadness possess you. I will gladly borrow all the gold I need to get you back. There's a very subtle and powerful illustration that Hafiz gives us here that's taking us to the next level in our journey this morning. The unreal bought you, right? Just to make this in technicolor, your name and your story is the unreal. The life of your separate existence is the unreal that you've been enslaved by. My mind has been enslaved by John, owned and operated by John. And I have been sheepishly and unconsciously addicted to John. It's all I've known. It's all I am. Everything I see, John sees. Everything I think, John thinks. Everything that's possible, it has to be in agreement with what John's learned, what John believes. And John is the one that says, do I have Buddha nature? Can I be enlightened? No. John is the unreal and can never, underline all caps, become enlightened. John is the unreal. When the real dawns in my mind again, John dissolves. John is a shackle, a chain, a self-deceiving plot that I've bought into. So that's why he says, I keep coming to your owner. So Hafiz is talking to you as you think you are, which is the slave owner that you don't realize isn't you, but you think it's you. But it's actually the slave owner that has your consciousness in chains. So Hafiz keeps coming to John and to you as your name, saying, this one is mine. The awakened one recognizes the light of being, knows you for who you are, knows your true value. And this is where it's really important to get and tease out the subtlety here. Hafiz says, you often overhear us talking. Hafiz is talking to John. And there's a part of my mind that's starting to want to wake up and gets a little bit of what Hafiz is saying to the slave owner that I've been calling myself. And there's something different about Hafiz's thoughts and words because they come from the real. That there's that part of our mind that's starting to overhear the conversation. You can often overhear us talking, and this can make your heart leap with excitement. In other words, there's the possibility that you're not lost, that you're not lonely, that you're not separate from love. Just a couple of more here. Is this reaching you this morning? Someone untied your camel. You better go back out in the parking lot and check that. Someone untied your camel. I cannot sit still with my countrymen in chains. I cannot act mute, hearing the world's loneliness, crying near the beloved's heart. My love for God is such that I could dance with him tonight or this morning with you, but I would rather, let's say that again, my love for God is such that I could dance with him this morning without you, but I would rather have you here. Is your caravan lost? It is, if you no longer weep from gratitude or happiness, or weep from being cut deep with the awareness of the extraordinary beauty that emanates from the most simple act and common object. My dear, is your caravan lost? It is if you can no longer be kind to yourself and loving to those who must live with the sometimes difficult task of loving you. At least come to know that someone untied your camel last night, for I hear its gentle voice calling for God in the desert. At least come to know that Hafiz will always hold a lantern with galaxies blooming inside, and that I will always guide your soul to the divine warmth and exhilaration of our beloved's tent. So he's basically saying, untie yourself from these beliefs. Go out into the desert of not knowing and cry. Weep. If you can't recognize you're blessed and you have everything that God has, then you have to untie yourself from these crazy beliefs that you're separate from it, from your natural inheritance. And by going out into the desert of not knowing and crying, you will be met by the guide. He's giving you archetypes here. This is a journey in consciousness. When you go into the desert of not knowing, you're dropping that questioning compartment of your mind that is unreal, doesn't exist apart from your belief. And by becoming empty of that, you can then hear a different voice, and a different guide will come to meet you and will begin to guide you on a different journey to where you really want to be, to where you really are. And then last one from Hafiz. Stay with us. You leave our company when you speak of shame, and this makes everyone in the tavern sad. Now, the tavern is the circle of Sufis. The tavern is the group of those who know. Stay with us as we do the hardest work of rarely laying down that pick and shovel that will keep revealing our deeper kinship with God, that will keep revealing our own divine worth. You leave the company of the beloved's friends whenever you speak of guilt. And this makes everyone in the tavern very sad. Stay with us tonight as we leave. Stay with us this morning as we weave love and reveal ourselves as his precious garments. So this is an interesting book. I don't know if most of us are familiar with Alan Watts. This is a little book he wrote called The Book. And it's subtitled, On the Taboo Against Knowing Who You Are. So when something is taboo, it's forbidden by society, by polite culture, right? So knowing who you are is actually dangerous to society, because we are in an agreement society. Whether we know it or not, we've all agreed to stay asleep. And as soon as you start to overhear Hafiz and the slave master talking, and that begins to excite something in you to want to awaken to your divine self, the agents from the matrix come. And they are simply your thoughts of self-deception. Because remember, nobody is doing this to you. But your mind is so powerful that when you agreed to go to sleep and forget God, forget that you are a part of God, and that you are and have everything that God is and has, you used the power of your divine mind to hermetically seal you into a self that you're not. When you begin to stir and awaken, you're going to be met with the sentinels of darkness, as the Course describes them, which are your thoughts in whatever form is right for you, that are going to scare the hell out of you or entice and tempt the hell in you to stay asleep. That's why your commitment to waking up has to be stronger than your commitment to stay asleep. Otherwise, you won't get out of your chains. So Alan Watts says this, within the sleeping ego, you have one extreme. And this one extreme is that there's a unique personal ego separate from nature and God. And as such, society is telling you as this separate ego that is unique and separate from God and nature. It's telling you you're free. You live in a democracy. And at the same time, society is telling you, conform. You're free, but conform. The other extreme is that you are simply a cog in the industrial collectivist machine. You're just a robotic worker in the state, right? And if one believes that the personal ego is the natural endowment of all men, as distinct from cultural or social convention, then the one who is simply a cog in the state machine has a bleak existence. For one sees him as repressed and frustrated, though his own society may never have defined him as such. So in other words, people who are just working to survive is the other extreme, right? Totally unique, you're free, but conform to the establishment. And you'll be good in society's eyes, and you might get places. There might be some upward mobility there if you conform in your freedom. The other is you're just trying to get by, eking out a living. You're a slave laborer getting a very minimum wage. However, Alan Watts says, there is a third possibility. The individual may be understood neither as an isolated person nor as an expendable humanoid working machine. He may be seen instead as one particular focal point at which the whole universe expresses itself, an incarnation of the self, capital S, of the Godhead, or whatever one may choose to call it. This view retains and indeed amplifies our apprehension that the individual is in some way sacred. The hallucination of separateness prevents one from seeing that. And instead of seeing that, we have been conditioned to cherish the ego, cherish our uniqueness that says we're separate from God, separate from nature, that we have this so-called freedom, and we keep conforming to social norms. And he says when you start to see the distinction, that when you cherish the ego, you're actually cherishing misery. You start to wake up. So then, finally here with Alan Watts, let's be clear, furthermore, that the ego fiction is in no way essential to the individual, to the total human organism, in fulfilling and expressing his individuality. For every individual is a unique manifestation of the whole, as every branch of the tree is a particular outreaching of the tree. The point, which can hardly be repeated too often, is that differentiation is not separation. So you are a unique expression of the whole, but you never leave the whole. Everyone else is a unique expression of the whole. Intimately, immediately, changelessly connected to you. And whatever you do to them in thought, speech, or action, you're doing to yourself. Because they are simply another version of you, but because of the grace of creation, they are a unique expression. The ego says you're separate from them. That's why you're unique. But he's saying very clearly here, based on these timeless teachings, you are an individual. You are differentiated, but you're also an expression of the whole. Think of your worth. We've got it, where we just have a part of that equation. We think we're individuals, separate from the whole. And our society celebrates that. This uniqueness. But it's meaningless. And it's full of misery. Have you noticed this? The more that we've gone into this postmodern hellscape, there has been this elevation of uniqueness and individuality and identity of body, all these body identities. And there's been increasing misery in correspondence or correlation to that. And it doesn't say kill the individuality and the expression, but you're not separate. And you're not an enemy to somebody else because they're different. He says if you believe this, you're bamboozled. And the individual, instead of fulfilling his unique function in the world, is exhausted and frustrated in his efforts. Because he is now so largely defined as a separate person, caught up in a mindless and alien universe. His principal task is to get one up on the universe and to conquer nature. The narcissist. This is palpably absurd, and since the task is never achieved, the individual is taught to live and work for some future in which the impossible will at last happen. If not for him, then at least for his children. We are thus breeding a type of human being incapable of living in the present, that is, of really living. So, let's just recap then. The one who's asking, who am I? Do I have Buddha nature? Is the one who is craving, who's thirsty, who's separate, who's cut off from God and nature. And in that identity is misery. But because we're not able to come out of the chains of our enslavement and our self-deception enough, we think that we have to listen to that separate identity on how to satisfy our cravings and find the happiness that we seek. And it's always not here, not yet. Have you noticed this? It's either back there and you missed it, or you messed up, or they messed up. Or it's somewhere out there, yet to be found. But sure enough, we will if we stay to our plan. He actually says you're a zombie if you're living that way. You're not alive. And that brings us to the final part of our journey this morning, Course in Miracles. This is lesson 139. And he says, listen to this. There is no conflict that does not entail the single simple question, what am I? Every conflict you have starts by you not knowing who you are. If you knew who you were, you would realize everything God has is yours. And you're not separate from the all. You have the all. Then there's no conflict because you're a part of the whole. And the wholeness is you. And everyone has the whole because everyone is like you, coming from the same source. Uncertainty about what you must be is self-deception on a scale so vast, its magnitude can hardly be conceived. Self-deception on a scale so vast, its magnitude could hardly be conceived. In other words, look at the universe. This is your making. You're actually at the epicenter of projecting your cinema universe. Each one of us, because we are the whole and all that God has is ours, we are these individualized focal points of the all, which means all of the power of the all already is operating in us. And we're unconsciously misusing it. And we're projecting what appears to be this vast creation from a very secret place within our own deeper nature. And the vastness of this universe is telling you you're not who you are. And you're doing this to yourself. Self-deception. So he goes on, and this is an echo of Alan Watts. To be alive and not to know yourself is to believe that you're really dead. Aren't these encouraging words? That's why one of the greatest Chan or Zen masters in ancient China, Lin Chi, a whole school of Zen started with Lin Chi, or called Rinzai in Japan. He used to look out at his monks that were receiving his teaching, and he would just call them, you're a bunch of ghosts. Because you're not alive. You're living in a future, or you're haunting the past. You're not in the present moment. You don't know who you are. Your number one thing, as this lesson says, is to accept who you are. Everything else will work. All the conflicts in your relationships will go away when you accept who you are. So again, to be alive and not know yourself is to believe that you're really dead. For what is life except to be yourself? And what but you can be alive instead? Now listen to this. Who is the doubter? What is it he doubts? Whom does he question? Who can answer him? He merely states that he is not himself, and therefore, being something else, becomes a questioner of what that something is. It's just a mind program. And it will never get you anywhere or anything. It's designed as a self-deception software program for your mind. The only thing to do with it is stop listening to it and know yourself by getting quiet and giving up all of the good and bad thoughts that parasite program is running. And finally here, this is some juicy stuff. Nothing the world believes is true. It is a place whose purpose is to be a home where those who claim they do not know themselves can come to question what it is they are. This agreement reality. You'll never find in the world the answers to your problems. So, finally here, you will come again and again to the world until you finally accept who you are and learn that it is impossible to doubt yourself and not to be aware of what you are. And then finish here with this footnote. So the idea to all of what's been said is that you have a split mind into two parts. The part of you that knows who you are and the part that doesn't. That second part that doubts who you are and tries to find out. But how can this second part be part of you, which means not separate from you, and simultaneously not know who you are? How can the doubter also be part of you who's doubting your existence because you're Buddha nature? You see how we've identified with the unreal? To know is to be one with, and what is part of you is by definition not separate. Based on the Course's thought system, what is apparently going on here is that the second part of your mind is really a case in which the first part, which knows who you are, has merely identified with something that is really outside of your mind, the ego. John, I am this body. And thus tricked itself into believing it does not know itself. Therefore, the not knowing of itself is not a genuine not knowing, but rather a case of self-deception. You don't consciously experience knowing, but you do know. You have simply deceived yourself into thinking you don't. Blue bag's going to go around. Oh, I guess we're still in that same situation. Sorry. While that's going to happen, does anybody have any thoughts or questions? If you are joining us on Facebook, please see the link below if you'd like to support the church and our 8 a.m. service. Go to unityofstewart.org and just make sure you select the 8 a.m. service for your love donation. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, when you say your heart, what do you mean by that? Your commitment to wake up? Yeah. Mm-hmm. 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 And that comes with you simply getting quiet and not buying into what your head is saying. If it's insisting that you're separate or somebody else is to blame for your pain. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can move mountains if we want to. Thank you, sir. Very grateful for the offerings. We bless it with the intention that we wake up in whatever form this energy needs to take to assist that process. And so it is. Amen. All right. Everybody good? Or any other thoughts or questions? No? Okay. Let's stand and seal the deal. Coming into the shining stillness of the present moment. This place deep within that is bright and untouched by any pain or loneliness, but is actually one with all life. And we rest in this abundant nature, knowing that the light of God surrounds us, the love of God enfolds us, the power of God protects us, and the presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is. Amen. Have a beautiful Sunday, everybody. Thank you. Monday, 7:15 in the classroom for our Course in Miracles. See you then.